Good morning.
Good morning.
It's good to be here. Really a privilege to be in front of you. As was mentioned, my name is Mike Morsberger. I've been on the job at Jupiter Medical Center just 100 days today. So in that short period of time, some of the things that Jennifer talked about have come into focus for me. There was an old joke in this area when I used to come down for several of the medical centers I worked for before, that where you go when you get sick, the joke was to the airport. The fact is, today, the Palm Beaches and the Treasure Coast, we enjoy world-class health care. And very fortunate at Jupiter Medical Center to provide some of that, and certainly grateful for this community's support. I think what's so heartening for me is that when I speak to benefactors, they refer to our medical center as their hospital. It's a very personal relationship. We're only 45 years old, and without philanthropy, quite frankly, what's been built over the past 10 or 20 years just wouldn't be possible. So we're grateful for your support. 250 beds, and as Jennifer said, just sort of through the roof numbers this past year, despite all of the challenges associated with COVID. So a couple things about the foundation. There's about 20 of us at the Jupiter Medical Center Foundation. We have a couple open positions. And of course, we focus primarily on bringing in philanthropy, but also stewarding the giving that has already arrived. And in our case, with most of the medical centers in the area, we have a tethered relationship to concierge services and personal patient navigation services to help out some of our most generous donors. It really seems to work for us, and I'm certainly grateful to be a part of the team. So I just wanted to start, Danita and I wanted to make this conversational with just a couple overview slides. The first of which, and you've probably seen these before from Giving USA, these are always 1 year behind, but in 2020, $471 billion given away. What I've heard is that we'll crest $500 billion in the year 2021. But I think the most important part of this is that 69% individuals and 9% bequests, which come from individuals, is 75 to 80% of all the money given away is coming from individuals and families. In fact, as you all know, some of the foundations created by individuals and families overlap with that, so it's probably closer to 85% of all giving comes from individuals. I bring this up because there's a predisposition among some of our donors and volunteers to believe it's all corporate, it's all foundations. Not true. Individuals is where the wealth is. Where's that clicker? The other one I wanted to show is where the money goes. And if you're not familiar with this, every year for the past 40 years that they've been measuring this, religion's been number one. Education has been number two, and usually human services, hospitals, healthcare is number three. You can see how the rest goes. Unfortunately, when the economy gets a little shaky, I have to tell you, arts and culture frequently takes a major hit. Some of the public society stuff takes a major hit. But I guess more than anything, I show this slide just to give people a sense of what is being distributed, and also a reminder that just because a person doesn't give to your organization doesn't mean they're not giving lots and lots of money to others. I've had a couple of board members who've been frustrated with fellow board members that aren't giving what they are. The fact is that frequently I'm most excited when they say that the place I work is among their top 3 to 5 philanthropic endeavors, their top philanthropic priorities. Ultimately, that's what we work on. We want to be in the front of that pack. Let me, I think, stop there, hand it over to Danita, and then we'll get into conversational stuff. One thing that wasn't mentioned is that she's a Terp at heart. She's from Maryland, where she was a cheerleader.
Oh, geez.
Yeah.
He was
all
also
rah-rah.
from Maryland, lacrosse player, but he went out of state to college. I stayed in the great state of Maryland. But let me say this, I've been a Floridian for 10 years, and I love it. I love the Sunshine State. My position at the University of Florida was probably one of the greatest jobs that I ever had. But let me start first by telling you a little bit about my orientation and how I think and how I've led at the University of Maryland, the University of Florida, FAU, and now the Community Foundation. So I started my career at Xerox, and this is back in Xerox's heyday, where the sales training was world-renowned, amazing. And what was ingrained in me as a 22-year-old newly minted professional was that customer needs or donor needs are the focal point of everything. And if you're going to be a good salesperson or an effective consultant or an effective fundraiser, you have got to understand what's driving the needs of the people to whom you are, with whom you are working. And so we were taught to leave that background noise out of your head so that you could listen at 100%. For what was being said, what was not being said. We used to call it the need behind the need. So as I have evolved, I've never forgotten that. And being at the Community Foundation now for 8 months, I feel that I can put this practice into full execution because the Community Foundation can be open to all needs. In other words, I'm not trying to, or we are not trying to force fit a donor into a specific program that the university offers. I can actually sit down and facilitate a conversation and be completely open to what inspires a donor's philanthropy, and more importantly, why. And so once we get a clear understanding of the what and the why of their passion and what it is they want to support, we're then positioned to talk about ways in which they can facilitate that philanthropy. So community foundations been around for 100+ years. They always served as a vehicle for wealthy people to support their community. And as this community foundation in Palm Beach and Martin counties evolves, what we're looking to do is to inspire philanthropy that allows us to help our donors address the community's most pressing needs. So we're in the process now of being able to articulate that. And I'm pleased to acknowledge Julie Lauterbach, who worked with me at FAU and at UF. She's our Vice President for Marketing and Community Engagement. And we are in the process of developing talking points that we will use, that we hope you will use when you're sitting face to face with your clients and looking to help them understand how to facilitate their philanthropy. So, with this community foundation, there are 4 ways that you can engage your clients in their philanthropic interest. First is unrestricted. Everybody loves unrestricted. Here's your money, we're going to create a donor advised fund, and you can do with it what you think is most important. And so that's where the community foundation can actually direct that money. The second option is the field of interest fund. And this is where we have donors who say, you know what, Danita, I am so interested in the environment. I'm going to open up this fund and I want it to be directed towards environmental causes, but you can decide which environmental causes. We call that field of interest. And then the donor advised funds. This is where we have a donor. I have one right now. It's a new fund. It's $500,000, but it is going to a very specific program in Delray to help 3rd graders with reading. And so this fund will grow, but it's very specific. And then there are designated funds, which are like what I just described, but there is no flexibility with how that money can be used. It can be only used for that particular target. Whereas the donor advised funds, we can actually consult with them before the grant is made. So these are the 4 ways in which our donors and prospective donors can facilitate their philanthropy through the Community Foundation. And interestingly, this money can go across the country. We'd like for it to go to the community, but there's some donors that prefer to use our foundation to facilitate their philanthropy where they would like, which may not be in the community. So let's talk about estate planning. So in 1979, our Community Foundation received its first bequest, and you can see what that amount is. Our largest bequest, over $15 million. And then we have a Legacy Society group, which includes 144 current donors who have created an estate gift, a plan gift. And of that 144, we've got 32 that are over $100,000, representing over $56 million in our portfolio. So what do those numbers suggest? It suggests that, first of all, I think almost all of those donors had current use funds before we actually got to the bequest. And so that suggests that once we create a fund on behalf of a donor, we then steward those donors. And in that stewardship process, our goal is to earn the right to be in the conversation, working with you or working with others, to have an opportunity to work with their estate. And so your first step is to have a fund created, cultivate, steward, so that when they're ready to talk about their estate, we can work with you to create those options. One last point that I'll share, and Mike will get back to you. What we're hearing now from some of our wealthiest fund holders relates to their family philanthropy, next generation, and how do they teach their children to be philanthropic with the money they've inherited. So we're creating a new service and that we launched a couple of months ago, and we're working with a family who's got 4 adult children, and the parents give the children $250,000 a year, and of the 4 children, one is chosen as chair. That person gets to decide the area of interest that philanthropy, they'd like that philanthropy to go. So the chair for this year selected substance abuse. And so the role that we're playing with their professional advisor at the table is we created a proposal of 9 different nonprofit substance abuse organizations in our community who we believe are doing a fantastic job. So we went out to their sites, we visited them, we looked at their financials, we looked at their outcomes, and we felt that any of these could be a good match. So we present this proposal to the children, the parents are there, and they narrowed it down to 2. Then we bring the 2 finalists in who present what they would do with that money, and I think we're going to have a decision in the next week or so as to how those funds would be distributed. And so this is something that we're going to be building on, and it's worked really well with their advisor and this family, and I want you all to just keep in the back of your mind when you're working with your clients and you're looking to help broaden your base of business with them. If they have children, if they're very wealthy, this is something that we are very willing and able to help you facilitate. So those are my general comments. I'm going to give it back to you.
Okay.
There you go, Mike.
Thank you.
You're
So
welcome.
again, we'd like to make this a little conversational, and we'll take some questions, but let me start with the point that Danita was just making about the service. I don't know if you all looked at the national papers the other day, but Wall Street Journal, giant full pager on the pros and cons of donor advised funds. Wall Street Journal yesterday, Bookshelf, book out called In Defense of Philanthropy, which talks about what's happened with the euphemism is wholesale philanthropy. Are the wealthy using philanthropy to control nonprofits or to control society, etc.? This has become a hot topic. I don't think so, but worthy of a read. And then where Danita just spoke, New York Times yesterday, when the wealthy give, it's with this firm's advice, talking about Bridgespan, the group that started out of New York, is now expanded around the country, helped Mackenzie Scott, Jeff Bezos' ex-wife, to give away several $1 billion in the course of just a couple of weeks. They sought out the organizations. At my last institution, University of Central Florida, we were the recipients of $60 million. The question I'm always asked is, did they call you in advance? Did you have any, what was the proposal like, etc.? We got one call by some mysterious person that asked for some statistics. She was very focused on allowing disproportionately sort of overlooked people from middle and lower class income families to get into college, and she was most interested in graduation rates. UCF had distinguished itself in that. There was another Florida institution, was it FAU or FIU?
No, it was FIU.
FIU got a chunk of change from her. It was rather remarkable. I wanted to mention on this topic about these advisors that are coming up, from the Palm Beach Community Foundation to a group like Bridgespan, or some of the trust officers here and other wealth advisors and accountants that give advice. I think around the 80s, when there were a couple United Way scandals, you saw a lot of people who used to give to kind of the community chest, broadly unrestricted. I trust these institutions. After those scandals and a couple of others in higher ed, etc., you saw people restricting gifts more and more through the 90s. Today we have a problem with this because, for instance, in higher ed, where I came from last, we have people that have created scholarships for little girls who were in the Girl Scouts from Volusia County to go to UCF. Well, guess what? 9 years in, after she created the endowment, we found no one to fit that slot. We should have advised her that despite, this strong desire to help a little girl just like you, this could be a little tough. I think we have the responsibility to be a little bit more upfront, and on occasion, sort of give them the bad news. We had a running joke when I was at Hopkins that you really hadn't earned your stripes as a fundraiser until you turned down your first million, not accept it. It takes discipline. That is a very difficult thing. Let me throw it back to you.
Yeah, it is indeed, but it's actually necessary. We say you pay now or you pay later. And remember, my orientation, needs are everything. And so if you don't have the moral compass to say, you know what, I love what you're interested in, let me tell you some of the things that you need to think about with that, then we don't think we're doing our job if we don't do that. And that's why it's so important to partner with people like you, because we can work together to share and convey messages that are in the donor's best interest. So
that's ultimately, we have a professional pledge in the world of professional fundraising in which we're fiduciarily bound to give the best advice we can, and not necessarily has to be all about the institution we work for. We like to think of ourselves as philanthropic advisors, and I think we need these partnerships. If we're in fact taking care of our donors, your clients, we should be working together. But it gets confusing, I have to admit. Recently, a donor that was talking to us about a very large 7-figure gift, to come together with this couple. They brought 2 of their children. There was a lawyer, an accountant, a wealth manager, and a trust officer. That's a lot of people trying to give them advice, and it was really a challenge. I kind of felt like there was a natural friction or tension in the room, and there was some pushback from some of the advisors about giving away so much in assets.
Right. The other thing that we're seeing with these Wall Streeters that are now relocating into our community, I have a lunch actually with someone who's just a rock star. He says, I don't want to deal with a lot of people. Okay, I got my person, and I'm going to work with you. And my expectation of you is to match what I want to do, and then I just want to sort of stay in the background, but you all can let us know about the outcome. So they're private. They don't want to deal with a bunch of DOs representing an institution or museum of any sort. But they do know they need to give their money away. In fact, most of these individuals have a philanthropic commitment with their firm, and so they just want to make it easy, and they want it to align with their interests to the best as possible. But I think the key that I would like you all to understand, and Mike and I spoke about this a lot, is that we should be partners. We should be strategizing together. We should be helping you help your clients, because when we're able to do that, we all win. And this example that I shared with this family, if it weren't for the advisor, I'm not sure how it would have gone. It might have been pretty clunky, but we're on the same team. And she's the voice. You know, we put the information together, she vets it, she looks at it before we actually send it to the children. And I think that's a real opportunity where, trust can be built and we help each other. We all have a vested interest in making that client satisfied. And so in this position, at the Community Foundation anyway, I feel really empowered to have an authentic partnership where I'm not trying to angle for something that this faculty member needs or the dean needs. I can be really true to the relationship. And we really can't do that to the best of our ability without people like you.
Well said. We were asked to touch on sort of things we're seeing from our desk to give you a little bit of a sense of where there's opportunity, but also challenges where things are changing. One of the things we also talked about that wanted to make sure you were aware of is what I'm seeing is a trend towards a lot of what I'll call blended gifts. So folks that frequently maybe they were all sort of endowment oriented or all capital oriented, we are increasingly saying, that commitment would be wonderful in your estate or in this plan, but we need cash now. One of the things that we're working on, and I've done a lot of in the previous institution, is those people that create an endowment in a form of a trust that's in the estate plan. So basically, I'm committing $1 million, you're not going to see it for 20 years. We're asking them, the income that $1 million would generate would be $40,000 or $50,000 a year. Would you consider, in addition to this bequest, a commitment of $40,000 a year in cash so that we can get this project started, whatever it is that's important to them? It's frequently, I can do that. It's rarely met with much in the way of resistance. It can help them out tax-wise if they're needing to move money. But I wanted to make you aware that it's not an either-or kind of a situation. It's an and-to opportunity.
And to Mike's point, last week in my office, I had a meeting with a donor and a professional advisor, and the donor wants to create a fund to support a program that his wife started. She passed a few years ago. And it's really important to him that this lasts forever, in perpetuity. And it's really important that the target audience, if you will, gets the benefit today. And so I said there are a couple ways we could do it. First, you can create the fund and we can use that cash to keep it going. And two, we can talk about your estate and what you see long term. So here's where we ended up. $1 million is going to start a fund to keep the program going. He's going to put this program in his personal estate, and he wasn't prepared to tell me what that was, but also they have a very good network of friends that he is going to speak to so that the $1 million in the fund can eventually become an endowment while he raises money from his network to keep in another fund to pay the current needs. Does that make sense? Follow that? So I think for I think the message that Mike and I are trying to convey is that we're really consultative with this philanthropic opportunity that we have with our donors, and we really are just completely focused on what's important to them. And then we try to develop, working with the advisors, the best strategy that meets their needs. And the only way that you can do that and actually win is to be in full partnership with people who are in partnership with the donors.
Well said. Perfect segue for me to mention, before I show a slide, gift agreements. Eventually, I think, generally speaking, with commitments of $25,000 or more, and certainly when we get into the millions of dollars, gift agreements have become a very important tool in making sure that the donor's wishes are guided. But I think increasingly, we're also seeing where we need to put in, for instance, capital gifts that include recognition that if at some point in the future, you, those entities associated with you, reputationally could harm the reputation of our institution, we reserve the right with trustee action to remove your name. Donors hate that language. But you've seen around the nation names coming down off of buildings, and for many different kinds of reasons. We have to cover ourselves on these things. This is why I'm hoping the trend lines will move more towards unrestricted and giving the institution leverage and leeway to be nimble and to invest in the things that are important to them, not just to the donor. But I think these gift agreements are something collectively we need to work on in such a way that everybody benefits. I want to show, I've got two slides that are intended to be a little bit provocative. Over my 30 plus years in fundraising, I have made note of what I'll call maxims or truisms about the business that are intended to be a little bit provocative. So I'm going to show these with the intention of creating a little bit of conversation here. More than anything, what I'm looking for is, where one of these 13 comments strike you as reaffirming, and yeah, that's absolutely the case. But what I'd really be interested in is, among these, and I've got a couple more on the next slide, what would you completely disagree with? Which one might you challenge me on? You can see I wrote this when I was working at a university. But any of these jump out at you as questionable or problematic? No? Well, let's go.
I'll say,
okay.
Number 9. So you can never really steer donor prospects. I've worked for 9 university presidents, and each president comes in with their pet project. And I can recall sitting face to face, we need to raise money for this. And I'm sitting there thinking, okay, well, I hope I can find somebody that's interested in that. And because that's my boss and it's my responsibility, I can recall sitting in front of that donor and I hear that voice in my head and I introduce it and I pitch it, falls flat. And then I feel, oh. So yes, you can't steer them, but it's an expectation by leadership that you can and that you should.
It's a challenging one. I've worked for 11 different presidents at 5 universities and medical centers, and I frequently, if it's not their pet project, it's their spouse, and sometimes it's really tricky. The president has put an expectation on you. You got to raise a couple $1 million for this. Help me out. Unless you've got a couple trustees or insiders that want you to do well or want to help this new president, that when it falls on its face, it's embarrassing to your leader and problematic.
And it's our fault.
Yeah. Well, whenever you hear, when I was at Duke, I used to joke that it's the only place in the world where you could raise $10 million and make more people angry than happy. The fact is, there's a lot of competition between colleges and athletics and teams within athletics and the multiple other component parts of the institution. But at one time, we had a very big benefactor who was about to give $5 million to the Cancer Center, and they said to me quietly, one special request, could you give me 2 tickets to the Duke UNC game? Well, the answer is yes, I'll find a way. If I have to go on StubHub to get these tickets, I'll do what I gotta do. But I quickly get a call from the chief fundraiser for athletics, who says, I'll put you in, Coach K has reserved a few seats for just these kinds of favors. So I take care of it. Tell my chancellor, who goes, are you crazy? Good Lord, Coach K will be all over him. They're gonna switch, they won't give to cancer, they're gonna give it all to basketball. That's crazy, that's paranoid. I think that's nuts.
That's realistic.
We've dealt with this many times before. Deans, you can talk to anybody you want except these 30 people. Same with athletics, same with the football team. The point of this is, I actually believe our donors would prefer if we were to say, we know you have multiple interests at this institution. You went to this college, your wife went to this college, you were married in the chapel, you go to the football games, you had your kids in the medical center. It would be unfair of us to come at you 5 different development officers with 5 different projects. Let's talk about where your priorities lie, what's best for you. Because I'm convinced that when a donor's needs sort of intersect with our institution's aspirations, that's when the magic happens. You can't force them into that slot. See if this one grabs you. I will say 19 is a favorite of mine because you're going to hear this a lot from board members and clients that become hyper-focused on, we need a gala, we need a golf tournament, we need a better web, or we need to mail to the world, or here's the groundbreaker, write a letter to Oprah. Danita, you've dealt with these kinds of things. It's well-intentioned, but really, folks, that's nuts. You're never going to get through to them, and yet constantly I hear these kinds of things resaid, rewritten.
You know, my largest gift in my career was a $50 million gift from a donor who did not want to go to a golf tournament, did not want to go to a basketball game. Oh, by the way, did not even want to meet our president. And it was all on the down low, and an amazing couple. And it took a while, but none of that drew that gift. And so that's just something, I think this is a really good one.
Yeah.
19.
Well, and I'm 21, fundraising is a contact sport. The more contacts you make, the more money you raise. I don't believe any magazine, any annual report, any website, any kind of social media or event can do more than one-on-one or small group get-togethers. And whenever possible, try to bring in leadership to have that conversation, to watch it develop. Again, I'm asking you all, do any of these sort of jump off the pages? I'm not so sure. Yes?
Well, just having chaired I don't know how many events over the years, but it was funny, we had one of our largest donors, and he likes to give, and we just never come to anything, which is fine. But he said, well, how much money do you make on the night of the event? It's not a big gala, it's just 250 people at Wall Street. And I said, well, we'll probably make $20,000 the night of, because you're not really making money. He said, well, why do you bother to go through all that time? I said, because all those people that are all friends with each other that like to give, that's their deadline. So it's not the event. It's the fact that they know that it's coming for next year, and it's going to be in their backyard, and a lot of them live in Wall Street and Seminole. And that's what they look forward to. It's something that can celebrate the fact that they supported the organization the entire year. But if you think about that we're making money at the gala, then you're totally all wet. And so he's like, oh, I never thought about it that way, like, because he didn't operate from that. That wasn't the way he operated. But that depends on when you look at it. He maybe gave one eighth about what we raised, but the rest of it came from other people, that was important to them, but not actually attending and buying the ticket. It was actually supporting the organization, and they were kind of celebrating the fact that they were working on this together.
I mean, that's kind of the dirty little secret about events, is the reality that frequently their net is is 10 cents on what they say they raised that night, because the costs are so high. And so when you have, again, if you have clients that are talking about, what I really want to do is, I don't know, 5K, and we're going to honor, my son, and all these people are going to come. God, that's so much work on the back end for a development office, and for what? Maybe $10,000 or $20,000? Problematic in the back.
Yeah, just to piggyback what you're saying, the whole transition to having organizations give the galas virtually now.
Yeah.
The transition to the Zoom platform, their net has increased significantly. The reach has increased, participation, giving has increased, broader, involved more people, the awareness increases, and they can do a nice video, they can have speakers, and then their net is significantly higher.
5 years ago, I never would have thought in a million years that 500 people would show up for a virtual Boys and Girls Club gala when I was in Orlando, but they did.
Yep.
In fact, a lot of the wealthiest people who always bought tables but never came anymore, give them to all the guys on the floor, or give them to the secretaries, this, that, the other thing. They were there. They were watching on their living room screen. They were participating. They actually, our auction tripled that year. So there's potential there. I will say though, coming out of COVID, people, it just seems, are anxious to embrace others and be together. So as I understand it, a lot of the galas in the area and other events are selling out fast because I think people have this need to have human contact. Yes?
I just love the simplicity of 20, the handwritten thank you notes. That really does go a long way.
Thank you. I have to tell you a story about that was inspired by a donor of mine. He had been honored at a previous institution with the President's Medal. It's basically one just notched down from an honorary degree. Big deal at a big event. His whole family came. He was very embarrassed, sort of a very humble man, giant donor. I went to see him a couple months after the event. In between, his dog had died. He loved this dog. And I had really come to know this man well. I loved him very much. And I had sent him a handwritten note when his dog passed. A couple months go by, I go to visit him. It was on a rainy day, because I remember when I came into the house, he said, come on. He said, let me take your coat. And he took my raincoat, opened his closet to put it in, and there was the President's Medal on the floor in a box in the closet, which sort of hurt me a little bit. I was like, God, what was the point? Walk into his living room, the only thing on his mantle is the handwritten note I wrote to him about his dog. And he got emotional talking about his dog, and he said, that note meant a lot to me.
We have a question right over here.
That's the connection I see in relationships. Yes.
Yeah, this is coming from a nonprofit. This is a nonprofit question, and kind of wish these donors would go to the community foundation because it gets kind of sticky when donors are competing against each other in the same organization, and it's very hard to make sure that you don't upset this one, this one. How do you guys handle that?
Well, so I've been in the role 7 months, and I will tell you I've met with almost not every, but stakeholders. I'm trying to get through all the nonprofits. The number one question that I'm being asked is, so what does the Community Foundation do again? Like, really, who are you? What do you do? And so that's why Julie's here, because we need to be able to be out front with what that question is, because it is really logical for the Community Foundation to be the facilitator of philanthropy. We do not raise money for ourselves. So we are Switzerland in a sense, okay? We can advocate for the community's needs based on what we know. And that nonprofit's going to get their money. In fact, I get letters every day from the nonprofit thanking us for facilitating a gift that we help to do. So that's on us, Marty, because we've not been good at messaging. We've not been good at conveying who we are and the value that we bring to the philanthropic opportunity. You know, my one family said, you know, Danita, we've been treating our philanthropy like a checkbook. You know, somebody calls me for money, I just write a check. You know, I never thought I'd have this kind of money in my life. And now I want to be more thoughtful, more strategic, more intentional about it. So give us a little bit more time, and we're going to get that messaging down so that there isn't that competition, because we're all for the community. So,
Yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult, especially for a small nonprofit. You know, you have to deal with their lawyers and
Yes.
and go through all this. And it'd be so nice for you to handle some of the tricky situation. I don't know if they'd ever, they're big domes, so I don't know if they'd ever really just do that. They kind of write big checks here. I
Well,
want this.
I do think, though,
That.
getting back to an earlier point about, I think we have to be seen as honest brokers. You know, we're not being paid on commission here. But some donors don't know that. We actually got a question the other day about, are you all commission-based? I can't fathom that, but that what they. On the other hand, you all have worked with people of extraordinary means, as I have, who are unsophisticated about these kinds of things. I told a story earlier about a woman I had worked with when I was at Hopkins Medicine. Elderly woman had lost her husband to cancer, and I was head of development for the Cancer Center. Long story short, she had made it clear she wanted to name something after her husband. It was very important to her. And we were building a new laboratory tower, and she really wanted a laboratory, which at the time was $100,000. We went out to lunch, and she said, I've looked at that drawing, and because we had mocked it up and everything for her, and I desperately want to do this. But, geez, I know I look like I'm from money, but and I have millions and millions and millions of dollars in appreciated securities, but I can't sell them because of capital gains. And they don't pay dividends anymore, so I'm sort of rich on paper, but I can't write this check. I said, well, have you ever considered gifting the appreciated securities, or creating a gift annuity or something? And she leaned across the table and said, is that legal? No one had explained these kinds of things. And then, I was like, listen, I'm not a tax advisor. You need to talk to somebody. But really, where there's a will, there's a way. We can make that happen. What questions can we cover? What other things are you curious about from our perspective? Yes, sir.
I just had a comment on 15, because, as a lawyer, I'm kind of a chameleon, and I don't necessarily want to talk about those things with a client. But as a development officer, I think it might be a way to build rapport if there is synergy, of religion or politics with the aim of the nonprofit. So just to say, in a categorical way, avoid religion and politics in every conversation.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
It is.
It's very risky.
Yeah.
And so,
I think this last go around, everything became so polarized.
right.
It was kind of scary in terms of people wanting this whole table to agree that this candidate in this position is the right thing. Man, I'm not touching that. Even if I agree,
Yes.
I'm afraid one person at the table will be against it adamantly. But
Right.
it's a nuance that I would agree on. Yes.
Sorry, I'm a ringer, I'm glad to say. Mike, the one thing I think that's missing on that list is that philanthropy happens on the donor's time.
That's-
Just like as you guys are working with them and their assets, you can push them to do something, and it could take 18 months before the conversation even happens with us. So, especially with year-end giving right now, and everyone's got these appreciated assets, and everybody's trying to figure it out. The understanding that we're here to help do that on that donor's time. If it means they move it to a fund and then we have a conversation, while we all have our, fiscal goals, just as you would have within your corporation, many of us in the nonprofit industry are not going to push your donor to make a decision that is not advantageous for them because it's on our time. And I think that might be one thing we want to add to that list.
The classic is the end of the fiscal year kind of ask. You know, it's late June and your fiscal year ends June 30th and you're trying to get a donor to get to come along. You know, June 30th, you bet, you know, sort of who gives a damn about June 30th, except, you know, this corporation, this organization, whatever our timetable is. That may not work for a donor. You know, end of the year may not be the best timing for them. It could take years. And that's, again, another tension with the board or a aggressive chief executive officer who needs the cash now, make it happen. I'd rather take the longer view personally. And I think when pushed in the direction of 25,000 now or 250,000 if we just keep talking for a year, I'll go for the 250. But there are pressure, there are goals, so it can be tricky.
So my philosophy is focus on the activity and the business will come. You know, I try not to chase numbers, and as odd as that sounds, it's coming from a CEO. I want quality activity, quality moves, and I've always led that way, and you know, it's sort of miraculous. The numbers come when you just focus on the activity. DO's chasing numbers, it just doesn't really work for the donors to perform.
I agree with that. I think another misconception is getting back to naming opportunities, that they're the driver in all the decision making. People want their name on the side of the building. Not so much. I mean, increasingly I have a lot of people of means telling me, I feel like I got a target on my back. I don't want the world to know about this gift. I'm doing it. Keep it to yourself. I'm good with that. And I actually think, again, I think the trend will lead in that direction as some people have just gotten way too narrow in the scope of what they want to give to.
Okay, I have a question for all of you. So, you know, I'm new in the role, and I inherited this wonderful organization, we call it the PAC. It's a Professional Advisors Council. And one of the things that struck me was how small it is. There's like 32 people, great people. And as I think about how we broaden our reach and extend our message, I'm grappling today with how do we get in front of more of you? And how do we share with more of you what we're doing, why we're doing it, and how we can help you with your clients? So that's the question. Yes, Dom.
I think that you kind of mentioned it earlier today. When I think of a community foundation, I think of it as should be the center of philanthropy for Palm Beach County on campus. So you guys should have the best ideas, the best, you know, education programs that advisors and everyone can come to, and so that you're not just there, you're actually active in the circles and educating people on the newest form of philanthropic giving, the new techniques for gift annuities or whatever it is, expansion into real estate or NFTs or cryptocurrency, blah, blah, blah. So I think if it was more of a resource, it would, instead of just being there, like I feel like right now, over the last few years, it's just there. It's not a place that people go to educate themselves, right?
Yeah, that's clear to me. Yeah.
So I think if you did that, like I told Abby, if you created the CAP program and facilitated that, then a lot of these advisors would go there and become invested in an organization that provided them the charitable advisor and philanthropy. So it's creating that, you know, people don't know you're there unless you go there.
Right.
They hear about it, but it's how to become the focal point of philanthropy.
Okay, yes.
You know, Lauren brought up a good point. We talk about some of the smaller not-for-profits. And a lot of times, if you could ask any one of us, what boards do you sit on, what non-profit boards do you sit on? I bet you would be surprised how many people in this room are sitting on some form of a board, or they're philanthropic. They might say, I don't need another board position, thank you very much, but my heart or my charitable interest is in X. And that's why I think the more you know about us and our charitable interests, the easier it is for you to say, well, we work with this group, we work with that group, and that might be another suggestion.
I agree with you. And that's sort of the heart of my question, right? It's like, how do we create an ongoing relationship with you all? I love our PAC. it is quarterly, but I even said, there's not, we need to be in conversation with more people. And so I'm really trying to develop a strategy so that you do know what we can bring to the table, and we clearly know what you can bring to the table. So how do we make that magic happen? Yes.
One thing I was sort of struck by in the presentation was your resuscitation of the history is going back 100 years.
Yes.
But the first donation here locally is 1979. What?
Yes. Okay.
The first question, without looking at the website or coming to ask you, what happened in the interim?
Sure.
And secondly, looking at our membership or others in the professional services industry, whether it's financial advisory,
Right.
CPA, lawyers who advise these clients, many of them have been practicing well before 79.
Right, okay.
So
Yeah.
I
Very
think that's
fair.
an opportunity. Well, I think when you go to
Yeah.
you know, it's got to start, I think, with that narrative from an education standpoint.
Right.
How do we get there and
Okay.
where do we go?
So let me clarify. 100 years for community foundations in this country. Palm Beach and Martin County will celebrate 50 years in January.
Okay, so that's
And-
72, 73?
Yes.
Okay.
And so if you look at some of the research on community foundations, they were typically started by people in the community that felt there was a need that was not being addressed. So Winsome McIntosh and her husband, they were on the island and they felt there were needs not being met. So they started it 50,000 years, 50,000 years ago. And then a few years later, we had a woman in Boca give 15 million, but she wanted it to support Martin County. And so that's when the foundation became integrated with Palm Beach and Martin County. So each foundation has its own history, but that's a really good point. Thanks, yes.
Danita, I think a great takeaway from today is that you shared with us that the importance of involving you early as a strategic advisor. I think many times if we can bring you in and reach out as a resource and connect you to our clients from the initial conversations about charitable planning, that will come together much more smoothly.
I think so. I mean, there are thousands of nonprofits in our footprint, Palm Beach County and Martin County. And I think where we're really strong, I don't know if you know Daryl Houston, he's our interim VP for Community Impact. He knows the landscape. He knows which nonprofits are the ones you want to invest in. And he won't say not, but he knows them. He's been with us 13 years. And so if we're brought on early in the conversation and we have a sense of what the areas of interest are, we can help you accelerate that conversation by saying, here's who you want to take a look at these 5 organizations because they are killing it in this area. Okay, we can help you with that. And I would hope that we would be in some ways, and I shouldn't say this too loudly, but kind of like a stamp of approval. Because we're drilling down on the financials. We're actually, anyone that we award a grant to, we follow them and we look to see if that grant is being used in the way it's intended. So you don't have to do that work. There was a question, Marty.
Yeah, this has happened to other times, and it should happen to you. And I'm sure if you just ask it would. But larger corporations or larger law firms, they invite us in to present to all their lawyers at a lunch and all their financial advisors. I'm sure if you know enough people in the community that you can ask certain corporations. You start big instead of one-on-one.
Right. I'm happy to do that. And keep in mind, too, that this community foundation, we are transforming. We are transitioning it to a different space. And this is board directed. It's kind of why I'm here. I'm a totally externally oriented individual. And so that would be a great component to the strategy that we are currently developing. Okay, so that you answered my question. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Others? Is there anything
Is this useful?
you want us to talk about?
Please,
We obviously
feedback.
are not experts on, tax strategies or 100% AGI deductions, et cetera, right now. That's not our area of expertise. We go to you all for that. Ours is to present opportunities to people that make our community a better place. Yes, sir.
In terms of new donors, what percentage then come directly versus, through a professional?
Ooh, that's a good question. That is a good question. I'd say for us, it's probably 80%.
Probably 80 to 85%.
That's correct.
Brand new from our groundwork, for lack of a better term, or our relationships in the community. Estates, it's usually a split with the donor and the attorney. There are many attorneys in this room that I worked with over a number of years. But as for brand new from a professional advisor, less than 15%.
Yeah.
So there's an opportunity as you're working with your clients and you look at their assets to match their needs, and that's why Mike and Danita are here today, because we can help you match your clients' needs to their philanthropic desires.
Correct.
I was just thinking in terms of backing what Don was saying earlier about the educational, so potential educational services or educational role for both sides of the equation.
Right.
I know I, as a smaller advisor, like that kind of stuff. I hoovered up.
Okay. It's a good point. Now, it's interesting. The other places I've been, or let me speak for higher ed for a moment. Typically, the big campaigns that they're in, 30 to 40% are commitments through planned giving of some kind. Hopefully, it's irrevocable and we can book the whole thing. But I think for us, it's probably less than 10% right now. But quite frankly, the hospitals, healthcare has to be just a little bit careful about promoting too large giving after you're gone. I don't want people to mix the message wrong with our clinical delivery. So anyway, we have to be careful.
So I do want to thank both of you for a fantastic presentation. If you have any other questions, I'd ask you to pull Danita or Michael aside in the interest of time and get you out of here as close to on time as what was intended. So again, I want to thank everyone for coming. I'd like to make just two